You are the 800-pound gorilla of shell Cordovan, which is funny, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you are. Like, I'll talk to other tanners or people who are like sort of trying to get into it, and like, I think they're wrong, but they think their best entree into, making a name for themselves is making their own shell, and they're always like, man, those jerks at Horween just suck it all up. They don't. There's none left over for the rest of us.
So what are we sucking up?
The supply?
Well, the supply of all the shell. Yeah. Thank you, John.
I guess.
Well, that's
no,
what
there's
we're
nothing
supposed to
wrong
be
with
doing,
it,
right?
I'm not being really critical. I'm just saying you guys
No.
gorillas of shell Cordovan.
If that's what we're doing, then if we weren't doing that, I would be like, we need to be more aggressive.
Correct.
Because we need more. I mean, that's like John and I were talking earlier today. Welcome to the Full Grain Podcast, by the way, guys. Thanks for being here.
Nice introduction.
John Culliton's the head of sales at Horween Leather Company, and we've got Shuyler from Nick's Boots, which is sort of a surprise treat, last minute guest, which is awesome. So we're talking. We have no specific agenda, but I'm sure I have some notes, so we'll meander, but we'll talk whatever we want. We need more raw material on the horsehide side of things for Cordovan, very cyclically, but definitely right now. And John and I were talking earlier about how uncomfortable it can be, or at least that's how I took it, John, as a sales person, when someone's like, I really want to buy this stuff, and you're just like, we can't do it.
So it's interesting because this is not the first time that we've run into a supply issue where there's a raw material shortage within the horsehide market. And so our attitude, because of who we are in that marketplace, because we want to be that leader, is we're gonna buy as much horsehide as we can, and that's our thinking, right? And so what Shuyler said, we try to buy everything possible, and we hoard that supply. That's probably true because in our position, we need to get every available hide into our tannery to process, and that's really our goal.
We're specific too about our requirements too. I mean, it's not like every horsehide out there in the world is suitable. Like we only want we want the biggest ones we can find. So, and there just are there.
Is it like Poland and Quebec primarily, or where you're getting the hides?
No, right now it's only about 5 to 10% from Quebec. The rest is European. So the Canadian hides have come down a bit just because they're not as available in Canada, and we're skewed more towards Europe at this point.
That's a food industry thing. I mean, we're getting the byproducts of whatever people are eating, and there's just people are eating less horse, at least in the parts of the world that yield the big hides that we want. We're coming in hot on this episode. Well, if someone wasn't interested, they'll definitely not be. They won't be sticking around.
So I have a question for you, because I've heard from other tanneries that they can sometimes get their hands on shells or just horse fronts or horse bows or whatever. But it's from animals that are basically used for burden purposes, not food. Is there a difference in sort of, which one you prefer if you were kind of coming up with the ideal leather?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that for the purposes of the Cordovan, there's not a huge difference. Sometimes those animals that are like the work animals are bigger even. So you end up with bigger shells, and they tend to be, just because they've been useful and they've been service animals of some sort, the animals are older. So the shells are often thicker, but there's like no chance of using the front on those because they've just been around for such a long time and they're so marked up. But I mean, that's one of the things about Cordovan that's so interesting, I think, is that we're not, we're using the inside. So the shell is hidden, or, it's inside, sandwiched inside the hide. And part of what we're doing, one of the hardest things that we're doing is we're exposing that fiber structure throughout that 6 months. So it remains pretty protected, as long as, it doesn't mean it remain protected from brands and deep cuts and stuff like that, which definitely happens. But even animals that are working animals are still good for our purposes, at least in that way. What do you think about that, John?
And there's fewer and fewer of those, right? I mean, 25, 30 years ago, there were more hides that were available because they were work animals. And there's fewer and fewer of those animals today just because it's been replaced by a tractor. It's been replaced by a mechanical process, right? And so for us, the majority of the hides that we get, again, are from the meat industry. And those hides have proven to be the ones that work the best for us in terms of size and quality to make that product. But it's getting more difficult, like Nick said. I mean, there are fewer people eating the horse meat in Europe, for example, and those food patterns are changing, and that's one of the challenges that we have right now.
Is this all ground that's been covered? Like,
No.
When is Nick Horween going to stop making Cordovan?
Never. I mean, never.
Never.
I mean, that's
So yeah, okay.
I mean, but that goes back to Shuyler. That goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning when we were just talking about us. You know, what was your term about? You know, us. You didn't
You're
say
the 800-pound gorilla of shell Cordovan.
Yeah, but again, our stance has always been the market. We want to be the market leader, and we will take the position of buying all the hides that we can get our hands on. So if they're available, if they're made available to us, and we can use them, and they're a good hide, we're going to purchase those hides because we need to make Cordovan and fulfill that market.
Well, and I should be clear, I did not mean that as a criticism or anything like that.
no. I didn't take it that way.
No, I didn't take it that way.
Yeah, no, I just hear about it. You know, like you guys are the best. Like, maybe a good segue is like, what are some brands that you think are doing? Who does like the most systematically excellent job with shell Cordovan from a footwear standpoint?
That's a good question.
That's
I mean, all the customers are not all, but I mean, they're on the scale of the world, they're relatively small at this point. So the way you have to work with that leather, I mean, it's a veg. You can't, it's not really, I mean, it gets, you can sort of kind of apply some mass production methods to it, but it just, I mean, it's the people that are doing the best job are probably the ones that have the most experience at this point.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really artisanal, right? I mean, that's really it's a true craft to make that product. I mean,
So John, why is the answer not Alden?
That's a great question. I mean,
it probably is, right?
It is in part.
Yeah,
it probably is.
That's our largest customer for Shell. I mean, that there's no really.
Yeah.
That's not a secret. I
No.
mean, that's people know that. I would say that they do a great job, and they're one of the most consistent. But you have to look at. There's other companies out there that are making great product. I mean, Carmina is a smaller one out of Spain who I think their shoes are beautiful. And you look at Crockett and Jones and what Allen Edmonds does. And so you have a lot of people that might make it different. And it also goes to the fit and how it, it's really a personal preference, right? Does the last fit one's foot, and how does it look? The expectations of the leather. I mean, the way that the leather finished. And so there's a lot of different variables in there in terms of what that leather is in terms of look, finish, and feel. And I think it's really important because, again, there's different characteristics that people like, right? And I think, again, Alden's super important for us. But again, at the end of the day, you have some great brands making great product around the world that, can be really proud of what they're doing out of the shell Cordovan.
I think Alden makes that leather sing at a price point that's tough, right? I mean, and I do think like there's probably, anyone who would dissect an Alden would be like, yeah, maybe there's some sacrifices made in the build or, certain components that go into it. But in terms of their actual like finishing and how they treat that leather, I agree with you. It's the experience. It's a calling card. They're excellent at it. I mean, I have two pairs. They look beautiful. They
do a nice job. But some of the Crockett stuff is exceptional, and I think you can really, and like what John was saying, it comes down to the pattern, which I think sort of steers a lot of people in one direction or another. I mean, what's the shape of the shoe, and what's the pattern like, and then how it's finished. I mean, because I think that everybody has a slightly different. Like the Carmina stuff, they tend to not really put anything on it. So whatever color you're getting from them is more or less the color that's left from us most of the time. Alden does quite a bit of, especially on color, right? They darken it quite a bit. But that's, again, like that's their calling card. I mean, they've got that really shiny, like sort of like wet finish.
Yeah.
You know, Crockett, I think, is somewhere in between. So it's just, you know, what look do you want and who has the color you want?
Well, but
who
can keep that thing perfect from beginning to end? I mean, that is a legit skill set.
Yeah.
I mean, so
on the shoemaking side,
Shuyler, I mean, you're using it a little bit now,
yeah,
right?
and I'm asking you for darker colors,
yeah,
for a reason. Well, it's a very accident prone leather, you know, and like so we're looking at line separation and kind of process separation that's going to have to happen with it, I think, to really. And I'm glad, Nick, you mentioned their kind of after treatment that they do to it for Alden, because it, you know, it does speak to that experience, like having that that history with the leather, because it does require a little bit of a different skill set to work with. I think ours will look incredible, but in some ways it's like, okay, you know, like some people have been working with this for 50 years, you know, it's a little bit of a learning curve.
There's a finesse. I mean,
yes,
it truly takes the finesse to work with the leather. And the end result, when people know how to work with it, is this product I think is second to none. I mean, that's what we think in the tannery, and it becomes an heirloom piece, right? I mean, you can
100%.
I mean, it's this piece of leather that is indestructible, that looks amazing.
It's unforgiving.
It stands on its own, man. Yes, absolutely.
It's unforgiving through the process, though.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
like looking through, like handling it, like oh, this guy can do the Cordovan, no one else can do it.
Well, no, it's funny. Because we do it, and like our guys have worked with it before. You know, the interesting thing is most of that experience was at White's. So they worked for us, they went to White's, and they came back. You know, Andrew Zamansky's he's a great bootmaker, but you know, he's told me like it's a challenging leather to work with. And I think it's interesting that White's has stopped working with shell Cordovan, you know, and here we are. I'm like, are we stupid? You know, like trying to get into it a little bit. But you know, I mean, those boots look incredible. I mean, they just always look incredible when you get it right.
They're super nice.
I agree.
Yeah, John and I were looking at some of all colors green that came down the other day, and you know, we can't make enough of the stuff. So when it comes down, we want to tread it, we want to sort it, and we want to get it to it has ordered it and get it out the door for a lot of different reasons. And this green had some. We didn't quite put the dye on maybe as evenly as we would have liked. And, you know, you sort of stand there for like a split second and you're like, well, you know, maybe if you last it, like you won't see it. But then we're like, this is not something we're going to mess around with. Like if this is supposed to be like the product, like our sort of like the feather and the cap, like it's got to be, it doesn't get out unless it's correct. I mean, that said, the colors it is really hard to control the colors on that because of the way we dye it and how it's dyed. So there is some variation there, but it's not like we're pushing it out the door because we're trying to fill orders. It's got to be right.
John or Nick?
I like that you're asking the questions. This is very nice.
I know, right? Where did this come from?
Is there a non-shell Cordovan product that you guys have released recently that you're particularly proud of or you think is incredible? I have one in mind, but I'm curious what you guys think.
That almost goes in line with like, what's your favorite leather, right? So I invariably get this question probably every week. What's your favorite leather that we produce? And so
yeah, what's your favorite leather, John?
And it probably changes every week because you'll see. I think I'm like really fortunate because I get to work in the tannery that we get to see a hide come in and we come up with ideas on new products, or I get to see heritage products, and then it goes to a company like yourself, and then I see this awesome product made, and you say, okay, Chrome XO is my favorite product this week, or Cypress, which is a new product, is my new favorite leather.
You have one other answer possible.
Are Oh,
Shackleton.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
exactly.
my point being, though, it's really cool because I think my answer for a favorite leather changes more than most people's, because I'll see something that's brand new in a new product and go, this is my new favorite leather because we've spent a year trying to develop this and now it looks really cool in the finished product. So right now I like Cypress because I just think the grain and the pull-up are super rich, and for a full grain product, it's, there's so much depth to it, right? It's just a little bit different than the pull-ups are richer. It's a little bit deeper. It's, has a different character than Chrome Excel. So I do like the Cypress. Historical leathers, I mean, I'm a Chrome Excel fan. So, I mean, that's, it's a great leather. So that's probably my favorite heritage leather that we produce.
Your favorite leather is CXL?
I would say heritage leather, yeah. I think new leather, Cypress.
Okay.
How about Nick?
I'm with you. It changes. I mean, there's the products.
It's a
where it's
podcast.
like,
I mean, you got to have some hot takes.
I'm working on it. I'm getting it. Let me follow. Come along with me. I agree that Chrome Excel's amazing, and there are derivatives of it. I mean, specifically like woolly Chrome Excel, I think is amazing, and we don't make a ton of it.
Can you talk about that? Because I see it from Viberg, and I'm like, what is this product?
Yeah, it's Chrome Excel. It's basically the same, but the stuffing blend is different and it's dried differently, and the surface preparation is also different. So it has all the same stuff, but it's darker colors only, like even darker than traditional Chrome Excel, because it has a lot of even more unrefined lanolin wool grease in it, which is like it's almost like a tar color. It has a super sweet smell to it. Yeah, it's denser because of the way it's dried, and it ages.
It's full grain,
like crazy. Yeah, it doesn't get any. The surface is totally grainy and different, and it's sort of like a cross between Chrome Excel and Chrome Pack, if I had to say something.
Really?
Yeah, because it's dried the same way, and the blend is a little richer. But the retannage is Chrome Excel. It's not a different retannage.
John, where was this, buddy?
Get some and make a pair.
You saw it, I think. Remember Skip?
Did I not like it?
No, you said I'm gonna throw you under the bus. You said I have like 30 samples here. I don't know if I can add any more. Next trip.
It's very possible.
Do you know there's actually a new leather right now that I like? Probably, the Roanoke that you saw.
Oh, that's coming out.
It's beautiful.
Hey, pipe down, brother.
Oh,
that's coming out.
Sorry, I let it out.
The timber's coming out.
Yeah, it's a beautiful leather. It's
it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I will just add, the Cypress has been, I won't say which color, but there was a color, a limited run drop. It was the fastest selling for a full mill. It was the fastest selling we've had, I think, ever. And that was last year. So that momentum's really continued. I think Cypress is really a beautiful color. The Italian brown Cypress, exclusive to Nick. So thank you for that. But the color 8 we have, it's just selling like hotcakes now, man. That's crazy. That was not the fastest seller even. There was another one.
That's great. It's super nice. I like it a lot too. It's a good blend of sort of old-timey philosophy and more updated styling. Yep.
Yes, it's lanolin. It's got some pull-up. It's a nice happy medium between a lot of the characteristics you see with a lot of different leathers. I think it's just a really wonderful.
So it's interesting because
wonderful leather.
And I'll ask you, Shuyler, because of the fact that it's more your customer base. It's interesting to me because it's in the boot industry, people seem to be going to firmer leathers. Remember, we talked about that when you were in Chicago.
Well, that's good for you, John, because this latest shipment of Italian brown Cypress was like the firmest I've ever felt in my life.
Correct.
So it's really good.
We're just giving the people what they want.
Yeah.
When Dan Cordova is listening to this, relay that comment to him.
I hope you do. Yes. No, I believe it, man. That's kind of funny because I also would disagree with you there a little bit, because the second kind of most successful cohort of your leathers we've had, aside from like your staples like CXL and Predator, has been the Shackleton leathers.
Mm-hmm.
Those have done really, really well.
And those are softer than Chrome Excel. So
Yeah,
I mean,
they're quite pliable.
yeah.
What's your current favorite non-Horween leather?
It's still Wicked and Craig Buck Brown, our double stuffed. Well, I mean, that's a hard question to ask. It'd be 1964 Brown, our work leather. It's probably the most optimized product that we have for durability, toughness, etc. But like, if you were talking just sheer beauty, I think the Buck Brown double stuffed from Wicked and Craig is it's great. It's just this pull up monster. It's super waxy. You get that classic color variation from the counter to the vamp to the upper, and we've had that for like 4 years. I would say that the new tobacco we have in double stuff has probably been our most successful color debut from the double stuff collection in probably a year. It's so like we were really searching for like how do you make like a medium to light brown from the double stuffing process, which is very difficult because the double stuffing process starts with essentially these base colors, then you dip them in wax, which totally amplifies whatever base color they have and darkens it. And so it was really difficult to find a base color that would kind of end up the way you wanted. So basically our most successful attempts at this are what we call the Mojave and what we call the tobacco. But they basically started out with like variations of yellow, and then you dip them. So you get this great color pop, but not too much, when it breaks on the last. And then I think it's just going to age really interestingly. I'm going to say tobacco double stuff. I love that color. I love it.
So when someone comes to you, because you're doing custom stuff all the time, still, right?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
You have inline stuff, right? And then people can come and they can customize stuff, or you'll do short runs for retail stores, or am I mistaken?
I mean, sort of. Yeah, we'll do short runs, and our short runs are still a full mill, of whatever, and we'll sell them or we'll do them with a partner. But I don't really, I don't like if somebody's like, hey, I have this like cool leather I bought off Tannery Row. Can I send it to you? Do you make me a boot out of that? We don't really do that.
No, I wouldn't. That would be crazy. Don't do that.
It happens all the time, though.
Don't do it.
It's so.
Somebody will do that for you, John.
If you just said,
not me.
If you just said we do that all the time, I'd be like, why are you doing that? Stop doing that.
No, we don't do
that. Sounds ridiculous. But I guess the question I was trying to ask is, so what? Other than when you're putting together something like that, are you putting together a line or a run of something and then selling that, or are people coming to you and saying, I want to do something that's like this? And then how do people end up specifically? I mean, I'm interested from a leather standpoint. Like, how do people end up in Horween or Seidel or Wicked, or, tell me, walk me through the process when someone comes in and they're like, I want to place an order with you.
The answer to that is relatively simple right now. It's like our work leathers are Seidel. They're 7 to 8 ounces. It's a great leather. It'll last a long time. I still think it's very visually appealing, but it's for a purpose, right? It's heavier duty. Horween is, you guys are a little more whimsical, right? It's like CXL, and then we take some shots like the Shackletons, the Cypresses, etc. Your guys' leather is spec'd at 6 to 7, which, despite it just being an ounce difference, does have like a different hand feel, right? Like you pick up the boot and you're like, oh, I can feel it in my hand that it's lighter weight. Now, that's not to say at all that it's like less durable or anything like that. I think it's just kind of a perception of when you pick up the boot, kind of how we describe them. Wicked it's a good question. A lot of our sales these days are on the double stuffed, and so I think we've done a good job of kind of sharing that. I think it's a pull-up story. Veg tan is obviously in vogue right now. Whatever you want to call it, but I think what they do with the double stuff is you get that multiple shades of color that come through the points on the boot that they get lasted. I do think it's a wonderful leather. I don't know. I think when we went into the veg tan development, we were like, this is not a work leather. It's not, I don't know. I think there was some confusion on our end, that there was some inherent advantage that chrome had over veg tan in terms of the durability. And that's just probably not the case. It's really a question of time and cost, right? When it comes to making those leathers. We have like a ton of people who use these veg tans quite heavily for work purposes. And it kind of surprises me. And I'm like, yeah, maybe like just because of the finish or whatever, like it'd be a little more desirable to have a heavier weight leather. But at the end of the day, I mean, they still perform quite effectively. But at its heart, Nick, I would say, the work is an easy tell. It's thicker, it's tougher, it'll stand up to snake bites better. We have the Horween line that is gorgeous and will last a ton of time as well if you take care of it. And then the Wicket, I think, is kind of a pull-up story, alongside this like beautiful heritage of being made in Pennsylvania, and they use the fertilizer for the crops, I mean, veg tan is an easy story kind of from a sustainability standpoint. So sorry, that's my long-winded answer to your question.
So when people pull up, so how, because that's in the world, people either like pull up or they don't want it or don't get it. So the pull up stuff, are you selling the pull up stuff mostly US, North America, or are you selling that other parts of the world, or how does that work for you?
Who doesn't like pull up? And what country are they?
Europeans. I say primarily in Europe. The Italians.
The Italians?
Not huge. Okay. I'd say Europe. UK understands pull up. Spain.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like, for example, like on our Chrome XL, if we'll do what we call a Euro Chrome XL, which has less pull up for some of those markets because they want to mute it down.
Nick, to answer your question, no. I mean, I don't see like a geographical divergence in that, but I now know I've never sold a boot to Italy, so it's kind of interesting.
I sell some flat stuff. No pull up.
Yeah.
It's interesting on your comment, Shuyler, about the perception of veg in the work boot industry not performing. But I think that came more about. I mean, obviously, chrome gives you strength, and the veg is, not as resistant to heat and not as strong as chrome. But a lot of it, I think, has to deal with the fact that as shoe production became so mass produced, the veg is not great in high volume numbers. You can't get it through the factory, right? So, but if you can make, if you look at veg leathers over in Europe, they make beautiful shoes. And if you look at your boots, they make beautiful boots. It's really about getting the leather through the factory rather than, it's almost like going back to the Cordovan story, right? Those factories that can use it, that have the finesse to make it, you end up with a beautiful product. And so within your line, you're doing different leathers that have different looks and different performance attributes, but you're building this great product out of different leathers because you can make it in your factory. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, that's a specialty.
I would agree. I have an anecdote from today. Actually, I had a kind of an upstart tanner that you would have heard from her. You would know them.
Give me the name. Give me the name. We'll bleep it out.
Well, no, it's your buddy from up north.
It's Ed.
Oh.
Yeah, it's Ed. But what was kind of interesting, I mean, we may need to delete this story, but what was interesting is
leaving it for sure now. No, I'm just kidding.
So he went to White's before me, like everybody does. I'm still deeply slighted by that, but whatever.
I think I saw you first.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. But no, he saw them over there, and what was funny is they were taking slabs of Wicket and being like, we want this, but make it softer. We want this, but make it softer. We want this, but make it softer. And like, Wicket is not, Wicket can't do that. To their credit, they got a process, right? And it doesn't vary that much. But he asked me, he's like, so why is it an issue for these guys and not for you? And I'm like, well, I think it's just because like we started out with Wicket when we were like 20 people in our factory, like back in 2020, and like everybody's just trained and grown and knows about it, and it's just like normal now. And so it's not this huge disruption when you have like some thick leather coming, or some poor you know what I mean. So the tensil's not very, or the tensile is very, very high. So when that comes through, like they just deal with it, and like they're used to it, and they can crank it out. Whereas like, if you're used to a softer leather, like a lot of oil tans and that sort of thing, like from Excels, and double shots, like they frankly can't handle it. Like it messes up their efficiency.
It slows you down. Yeah. I mean, that's what firm leather does in every factory, just about, that I can think of. Is that there are sometimes where you want it to be firm for performance reasons, but almost across the board, whoever's working with it, they want it to be as soft as possible, because it's just easier to, in most cases, it's easier to get through the machine. Unless you're splitting or skiving or doing stuff like that, then you want it to be firm. But yeah, we run into that with sporting goods, with football specifically, because we want to make it as firm as possible, because that's when you get the best pebble retention. But when they're sewing it and they're turning it, inside out because they sew it, or I guess they're turning it right side out because they sew it inside out, they want it to be soft. So it's always like a battle between the two. What John said about the veg being more of like a factory problem, because you think about someone, if they're trying to be efficient, they want to wet it, they want to stretch it hard, and then put it on a last, and then put it through an oven, and then take the last out so they can use that on another pair of shoes. So you just can't do that to Cordovan or veg, because it just
burn it.
You'll tear it, and then you'll burn it. So
wait, what? So sorry, what's with the oven?
Oh, look, drying. Like if you want to dry, if you're wetting a pair of shoes, and and then you put them on a last, and you want to get the last out of there as quickly as possible, you're going to put it down like a forced air conveyor.
Yeah, we don't do that.
No, well, that's why you can.
I don't know very much about a lot of other mass market approaches. Yeah,
that's okay. Yeah, this is a good John question. Like when we have a fan that faces upward from the ground and blows air on it. Yeah, John, when someone comes to you, because maybe for transparency reasons, you sell other stuff than just Horween. So you sell
tannery rope. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and you sell like non-competing lines. So when someone comes to you, how do you start to narrow down what you're going to show them and what you're going to suggest to them if they come in as sort of an uninformed person?
That's a great question, because it's really about what they're going to make, number one. And so first, only talking about footwear, the first thing I'm going to find out is where they're making that footwear. So if their answer is I'm going to make it in Asia, right away it's got to be a combination tan, right? Because if I put a veg leather into a factory that's going to do the process you just described, Nick, where it's going to go through a heater at 500 degrees and be on a last for about 3 minutes, that leather is not going to make it. And so it's really understanding what the process is going to be for that footwear factory, and then trying to match up that leather to where they're going to make it, and then secondly the characteristics of what they're trying to achieve. So if someone's trying to make a pair of sneakers in Asia or in the UK, in the UK you can get away with some different types of leathers. If they're going to make it in Asia, again, it's going to be a retan that's going to have probably not a lot of oil content either, because again, Chrome Excel, for example, that they struggle with, just because they're gonna cook that leather. So it's really trying to figure out where, how, and the character. So it's interesting. One of my first trips when we were selling a big brand, and one of my first, I get this call from a friend of ours that I don't want to name the big brand, and they moved production from the Dominican to China, and he goes, "We have a problem with your leather," and it was Chrome Excel, and I said, "Okay, what's the problem?" And they said, "Well, all the finish is coming off and the toes are cracking." And I said, they're using too much heat, and they said, "No, we're following the Dominican Republic instructions perfectly. So you know what? You're gonna have to go to China and figure it out." So I get to Guangdong and to China, and I get to the factory. And the first day they don't let me into the factory because they just tell me that there's problems with the shoes, and they put the shoes on the table, and there's finish off the toes and all the toes are cracking. And I was like, okay, you guys are using too much heat. No, we're not using any heat. Well, by the third day, we finally get in the factory. And like Nick described, there's a heater that the uppers are going through, and it's like 500 degrees. And they're going in perfect, and they're coming out with this condition. And so we said, can we turn down the heat? No, we can't, because we need the last off the shoes and to get the
Make
next
more boots.
shoes made.
Yeah, or make more shoes. Yeah.
And so it turned out that they ended up working it out. But that type of construction story, I mean, you're not gonna be able to put a veg leather into that, or a really sensitive leather into that type of factory. So you're pretty limited to what they can make, and that's part of the problem that our industry has right now, because you're limited to what some of the big brands can do, right? I mean, that's a tough statement right now, but
it's part of the problem that like consumers have though too.
Yeah,
It's like they don't get access to all these cool ass leathers. You know what I mean?
correct.
Unless they're willing to spend the money to have somebody not use a freaking oven to maximize last utilization throughout their manufacturing process.
Right.
Nick, what leathers have you invented? Like you specifically.
There's
Like what's the best one? Give me like top 3.
top 3 that I've invented.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure
I can give you one right now.
What's yours?
I think Lux is great.
Yeah, Lux is good.
Yeah.
I did a ton of work on Essex for a customer that we don't do work with anymore. And I think that product, with the way we were doing it, which I wasn't really inventing it, but the way we had it dialed in initially, I thought was really excellent, because we were doing it in a bunch of different colors and it was really awesome. And then where it went to, I think it sort of lost the mystique, the magic.
Yeah.
And then now they don't work with us anymore. But so there's a very like sort of Essex. I feel like I dipped my toe in that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I sort of look at something a lot of times. I'm looking at something. It's something that we do, and I'm putting like a spin on it. Because I'll show my weaknesses maybe, but like my technical knowledge is like not deep enough to really like fully invent something start to finish. Like I can be like, oh, I like this, and I can sort of dig into it and then figure out how to make changes. Then I can talk about it, but I'm not going to say like, oh, we need to go up 2% on the oxalic acid. Like that's that's a little over my head. I mean, and maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe that's where I'm falling down on the job. But yeah, we did a leather in a jacket, which I think we only did it one time for shot for a 316, and it was this like jet black rough out suede kind of deal. And it was so, I have one of the jackets and it still feels wet. Like there's so much stuff in it and on it. It was a product, the base product was called Sonoma, but when we were done with it, it wasn't Sonoma anymore, which I don't know why we don't do more of that product. I think it's awesome, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've done some stuff that I think I'm like, oh, this is unbelievable. And it just never goes anywhere. Like we did some black like horse hide on a crust that we have like a little bit of stock on. I don't know if you've ever seen that, John. I'm like, this is awesome. But it is awesome, but you put it on the table next to some other stuff and it's not different enough to what's out there. So it doesn't necessarily get made into a product, but if it got made into something, maybe it would gain some steam because it is different enough in terms of how it would wear, but that happens a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Same thing with shoes, man. It's like you gotta it's gotta pop, right? It's gotta pop. It's gotta show.
Yeah. And also conversely, we've made some products in the past that I think are so horrendous, and we sell a whole bunch of it. It's like, and that's like the kind of stuff you're like, well, I guess we're gonna just make it the best that we can. But it's like, I don't see it. I don't understand. Like I would never wear it, but that's part of being in business, Specifically, I'm thinking of Tempest and Renninger, John.
Yeah. Well,
Those
it's
are both
interesting because
gross.
so like when we're working on putting the line together, I would pack like this suitcase to go on the road or go to a show, and I would always pick the ones that I like. And there was this guy in the industry. He said, always remember, for every 5 products you take 3 that you like and 2 that you don't like, because invariably someone's gonna like one of the 2 that you don't like. And it's so true. Like the ones that Nick just said. I mean, we sold like on Tempest, we sold so much for it to the cowboy boot industry, and it's not a great looking leather, but in a boot, in a cowboy boot, it looks good. But on the table, it's not a great looking leather, and so it got picked up by accident, and we sold a lot of it. So every once in a while, you get those, and you're like, huh, I would never show this, but
It got
someone,
made by accident the first time too.
pardon me?
Isn't that one of the ones that we made by accident the first
Yeah,
time too?
yeah, yeah.
It's like,
So, like, how do you guys transfer, all the vision that went into making this leather appear a certain way? I struggle with this, right? You get the little square cutting, and you're like, well, this is really hard to understand. Like, what is this actually going to look like? How do you guys decide, like, this is actually going to look great in a shoe, in a wallet, and basically in a non-football basketball application? How do you figure out something's going to look great?
I think it's trial and error, right? I mean, you have a vision of what you want. Like, I mean,
Well, I'm
so
sorry, John. I don't mean to interrupt. Like, mechanically, do you work with suppliers? You're like, hey, can you make me a sample of this
yeah,
sample run we're making to like see how this comes out, etc. Just kind of like tactically.
yeah, but like that's what I was gonna say. So like you were in June, right? And we're working on this new horse product called Aspen, that line Aspen that you saw. And I think it's a really cool. I mean, it's one of those lines that I'm really excited about because
me too.
it's on horse. It's a straight veg. It has a character that's really aniline. It has a glazed look, so it has all these really cool properties. And you're like, okay, we're onto something. And so, like when you walk by it, Shuyler, you're like, that's really cool. So it's really getting that product in the hands of makers and say, okay, what do you think of this? And is it gonna be good for boots? I think it's gonna be good for boots because we're gaining weight in the leather. So instead of traditional horse being 3.5, it's plumping up to 4.5. So,
The acorn looks sick. I will
right.
say that.
And so
Well,
it's
so there's something. It's a little translucent or something like the. So I feel with the darker colors, it actually. I'll show you. I'll show you.
Yeah. But
I'll
again,
show
so
you.
that's kind of the process, right? Because a lot of times we'll work on stuff and we think it's going to be great, but it might not work in your process, or it might be more suited for accessories. And so it's one of those things that you're just really trying to get people to make something, because and there's also leathers that look great on the table that don't look good in a finished good, and vice versa. I mean, there's leathers that we've made that you sit like what we were just talking about, that Nick said, on the table it doesn't look good, but in the finished boot, it's a really cool looking leather. So, you have to get people to try different leathers and different applications.
Have you thought about having, I don't know, maybe a process or network around? Okay, we think this is going to be a good footwear leather. We think this is going to be a good wallet leather, whatever. And like, these are our people. Hey, can you make us a sample or something like that and see what this looks like?
Like an ambassador program.
Or like maybe a preferred brand program,
Yeah. Yeah.
that you support with lots of podcast visits and that sort of thing, something like that.
I'll let Nick answer that one. I think it's a good idea because
Yeah.
I think the more we can work with partners and customers, I think it's really cool. And then,
My only hesitation there is that, we're like a job shop. So everything that we're doing is made to order. And so when someone, if you come to us and we're going to show you a line of stuff, and I like the Italian brown cypress. So you're going to order that. So once you make a boot out of that, we're not then going to go be like, oh, you guess who's using Italian brown cypress? So a
Well,
lot of
because
times,
sometimes, Nick, it feels like that. Just FYI.
are you being
I
serious?
told you. Anyway, whatever. We don't
You got me for a second. Yeah. So I think that, I mean, I don't know. I guess if if it was something that we liked, and then we could say, can you make me a boot out of this? And we send it to you and you make a boot and you're like, I love it. I want to order some, or like, I don't know what you guys are thinking. I'll send you this boot. Good luck with your life. So I mean, I guess in that way it would work, but so much of what we're doing is made to order and sort of specialized, and we sort of try to be sensitive to that. So I think I guess we'd have to walk the line if we were going to do that ambassador thing.
Aren't there like certain tannages you're pushing more, right? Like Cypress, DXLs,
Not really.
Cultons, sorry, what, John?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it gets pushed because, you've seen me, I've come out and visited you, and there's only so much room in that suitcase, right? So a lot of it is based upon what I can pack and what I think is important at that time. But it's crazy. Our line is pretty extensive. I think if we were to take all the different leathers, there's got to be 100 different leather lines that we have, and some of them get forgotten over time. I mean, there's probably some like I think Nick mentioned Sonoma. Sonoma is a waterproof leather that has this really great feel that it should be probably reintroduced because it's a really nice leather. But you know what? We forget about it, and you're like, how come we're not selling it? Well, maybe we should be selling it because it's a nice product, but you tend to forget about it. So it really is based upon us putting the line together, thinking what's important. But there's a lot of times, like, again, when you're walking through, you might say, hey, what's that? And it's something that we may not even think that you're gonna to like.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those opportunities. And the other thing that we probably should look at doing is there's probably a step in the leather, building that program with colors, exclusivity and colors, right? And that's something that we've talked about in the past. Like, how do we make something exclusive to a brand or to someone who co-developed something with us? And those are all good ideas. We just have to really kind of focus and build that out, right? Because I think that would benefit you, for example, if we, if you got your hands on Cypress and said, hey, this is my color, that's roll with it. And I think that
we already did that with one
right.
of them. I just want to make sure we don't forget that. But also, like,
we haven't forgotten it.
No, I don't know. I agree. Like, if you're a job shop, why not, take advantage of that and get some repeat orders on the stuff that works. I don't know.
Yeah, we should push more on certain things. I mean, and I have an industry friend who I won't name, who whenever he visits, he's always like, you guys are such idiots for making so many different things. Like, why do you guys make so much stuff? I mean, he's like, it's amazing that you can do it and that you do it and you're willing to do it. But from a business standpoint, like, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you making so much different stuff? But I do think that sets us apart also, because we never really, I remember having conversations with people, like a bad customer years ago. They're like, do you still make this product? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we still make everything we've ever made. Like, there's nothing. Like, even like if you came back, even if someone came back and said, I want to order Tempest, we'd be like, okay, well, let me go dig the formula out and we'll run it, see what it looks like now, because maybe the dyes are a little bit different, or whatever. Because that was probably 20 years ago at this point, right?
Yeah. At least.
So, but I mean, it's not like nothing ever really gets retired, and I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. I think it's mostly, I think it's 50-50, actually, if I'm going to be honest.
I think it's cool that, like, you guys have been around so long that, like, colors and Pantone names have changed, right? And so you call something tan, but nobody today would ever call tan.
Our tan's rust.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome, and that's what I tell people, and I think it adds to the story.
Also, we have like 50 different.
What is mock, Nick? What is mock?
Mock is like, we were trying to make natural, but it's just like a little bit too dark, so we need to come up with a new
where's
color.
The mock? I figured it was some moccasin customer you had that asked for this, and you just like took that and put it on.
I don't mean we've got.
All right.
I mean, this you're asking me to answer a question that predates my birth. Like
and it predates me, and I could even ask we can ask our respective fathers, right?
Yeah. It's like, what people are like, what do you like? What's the name code in that color mean? Like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, that's like the first day that we took the order for it. It's like, but there's just, it ends in 72. It's like, yeah, well, that's when we first took the order for
Great. That's great.
But it's
That's
2024
great.
and we're still naming it the same way. Because if we changed it, the guys on the third floor in our place would be like, I've never seen this color before. It's like, well, we've been making it since 1972, and we just changed the name, but okay, we'll change it back because I don't want to fight with you right now.
Can I get a mock something in 1972?
More older.
Yeah.
Like what would, okay. All right. We'll talk about that offline. Yeah.
Mock Latigo, I don't even know.
Mock Latigo 1972. Boom.
For probably the 50s.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because a lot of the old color names refer to years too, right? So like 93 Brown was developed in 1993. So they thought was a good way to keep track of stuff.
5872, 4564.
What's with the colors? The colors.
The what?
What's with the color names? Like the colored numbers. So there's color 8, there's color 25, there's lots of colors.
Well, that's different. The Cordovan's numbers are different.
The color numbers, they predate us.
Yeah, I've been told that the original, like the very original dye manufacturer, like probably back in like 19 teens or 1910 when we first started adding color to Cordovan, way back then, because in the beginning it was all natural. That the color, like that, they're just their color number for, or their dye number for the burgundy was color number 8. So color number 8 was how we ordered it, and that was, color 8 was the straight dye, and color 4 was half the concentration, and color 2 was half the concentration of that, and 6, and 25 was another brown dye number, and it's
a lot to keep track of.
It seems like it. It seems like, and John has more stuff in his head than I do, for sure. John, the world traveler.
There's a lot in there.
Well, it's so complicated. And we were talking about factories before. Anytime we get it, like an order from a factory that's never worked with our stuff, it's always like, okay, well, you're just ready to have like 3 months of conversations about how everything is not working and how bad our stuff is, and it's just that you just haven't worked with it before. And they must have those conversations with other places too. And it's highly dependent on the factory and what they're making and where they're making it. But like we were doing some, when we first started getting into like the tech space products, which are highly technical, as you might imagine. Like just some of the things that they were doing, it seems so simple as to what the problem was, but they're so used to working with ballistic nylon and steel and plastic and whatever else that they just don't understand that this is a material that has any sort of, that can change it all. Going so far as like when they were cutting the material, they weren't picking up the dyes. They were just dragging the dyes across the surface of the product, which with the nylon doesn't matter. But with leather, they were scratching it every single time they did it. And it's like, all this is junk. Huh. It's like, well, you just have to pick it up. Even if you pick it up like a millimeter, like you avoid all that. But stuff that seems so simple, you sort of get in your lane. So there's just a lot. There's a lot to think about, especially when you're getting involved with somebody new, diagnosing potential challenges and stuff like that. Some of the things John has told me over the years have been like, I don't know how you don't pull your hair out. You're patient. You're a patient man.
You do have great hair, John.
It's gray. It's still there though.
It's still there, but it's going gray. Yeah. It's interesting because, like, for example, like right now we're working with the new factory group, and again, it's over in Asia, and they're going to use Chrome Excel. And we get an email about 2 weeks ago because they tested the oil content, and they said it's in excess of 20%. And they said, yeah, that's what to be expected. And they said, well, you have to redevelop that, needs to be under 12%. That's not happening. That's Chrome Excel is never going to be under 12%. So, those are the conversations that Nick's talking about, because there's not a understanding. It was spec'd by a brand, and there's not an understanding of what that product is at the factory level. So it's a lot of hand holding to get that product through, and you eventually do it through education, but it's not, you're working in a different culture with a different language, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. But again, if you can really hold their hand and educate them, you can get that product through, and hopefully they can make a nice product that becomes something that sells well in the marketplace. I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah, and sometimes the common language is like a spec sheet, and it's like that's like the percentage. You're 2% off on this, or it's too. I don't know. It's you got to 39,000 flexes, and we wanted you to get to 40,000, and it's like, well, it's
the water.
Can we have a conversation about this before you just decide you want to send it back, because maybe you want to like test a different piece from like a different hide, and maybe like it's just but when the communication is tough, that like people just default to what they can measure. And with our stuff, it's we're still using a lot of natural materials. I mean, tree barks and aniline dyes, and how that stuff works together. And I think that the bigger the factory and the newer the factory, that oftentimes it's harder to sort of get them on board because they're just not used to seeing it. I think I kind of just repeated what I just said, but it's an interesting challenge, I think. It's
probably the last like non-uniform material that's used at scale, right? Like if you think about it, like for apparel, wood, for upholstery, for whatever, you know what I mean? Because everything else is synthetic. Even cloth and fabric is pretty regular, compared to leather.
And that's the big challenge, right? Because you're taking these skins that are all inherently different, right? Every skin's different. And then as the tanner, you're taking these skins that are inherently different, each one, and then taking that product that's not uniform and trying to make it uniform so you can then make a finished product that looks uniform. So it's a tough challenge, because you're taking, again, exactly what you're saying. There's so many variables in this process, in this product, that fabric's easy to cut. Leather can be challenging. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have an education and understanding of that material.
One of the things that John and I are talking about too is like, what do we want to talk about tonight? And Shuyler, you've made this probably 50 times more interesting because you asked a bunch of really good questions instead of John and I just sort of commiserating about how things are. But it's interesting some of the things that we deal with in terms of like misconceptions about our product. And all the time we get like, oh, well, how come you sell that guy the good stuff and you sell him like the not good stuff? And it's like, it's all the same. Like, it's like, people are like, well, the Chrome XL you sell to X brand is way nicer than you sell to me.
You charge more to the non-Nix brands. I know that. John tells me that all the time.
I thought we charged you more.
Yeah. No, I think it's, oh, no, John. John. It does feel like that sometimes, Nick. I would say
no, we don't. we honestly, we're like, maybe we should be more like shifty about that stuff, but like we're not complicated. We're not complicated people. It's always like it's easier to just like go along and tell everyone the same story than to like try to keep all these different prices and stories in your head. So
I don't need more gray hair, right?
Right.
No, I know. You guys are always a pleasure to deal with. I bitched to John about lead times before this call, and I feel like we need to bring it up. But we should. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So it is something that we don't like about our business, and our business specifically these days. It's it's a real challenge. I mean, I think that. I mean, John can speak to it. I mean, what percentage of conversations, John, are you having these days that are just delivery date related?
Probably every morning, my first 2 hours of work are all related to delivery.
Yeah. So it's not just you guys. I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, it's always taken us longer. Like, it's just the way we make stuff. It just takes longer. And
But what if I tell you 8 to 12 months in advance?
But
I think we can do that.
Because we schedule, John, and like the scheduling doesn't always work out. And that, I think, honestly, if it's me like doing a limited run, like, okay, I want Cypress 8, whatever, like whether that's 2 months, 3 months, 3.5 months, like I can deal with that, right? I can prepare the customers for that.
Yeah.
It's the like regular shipments that I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna need this much per quarter or whatever, and that's where it gets tangled up, and that's where it kind of messes with our throughput and all that stuff.
I mean, the answer is that helps insulate you from our challenges. But like, you shouldn't have to do that. I mean, we shouldn't. That shouldn't be a requirement for dealing with us, because most 99% of people don't want to do that. They want to come and they want to say, "What? Well, I want this. Can I get it in? Can I get it in 4 weeks? Can I get it in 7, 8 weeks? Whatever their sort of tolerance is for how long they want to wait for stuff." And we want to make stuff faster. We don't want to make. I mean, maybe faster is not the right word. We want to be more accurate with our scheduling. I don't know, John, jump in if you want, because I mean, it hurts us. I mean, really. I mean, it's one of the things that we work the most on, is trying to figure out, like, how can we get stuff through in a timely way. And right now for us, the limitation, I mean, as long as you're not talking about Cordovan, it's just people.
No, it's not Cordovan. But hey, John, when did I order Shackleton Greener Pastures?
Pardon me, the new one or the old one?
Well, December. It's the original.
Yeah, we shipped that one though, right? I mean, no, if that.
Yes, it did. It did ship. Hey, you did it, buddy.
Yeah.
But pretty recently. Just saying.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, so that's a problem for you.
About a month ago.
That's a problem for you, because it takes us a while to make it, but it's a problem for us too, because we'd like to get it to you so that you have a chance to make it and sell it and then buy it again. I mean, that's sort of what that's kind of what we all want to do, is to be able to.
It's also the easiest to sell it when you get the examples out in the marketplace and people can take pictures and show other people how great it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the question's never, and honestly, this is probably true for both of our businesses. It's never like, do you make a great product? Yes. Do you have all the supporting infrastructure and customer experience and all the other stuff that goes along with that? That's what I always freak out about. It's like,
I mean, it's a really interesting thing, right? Because like Nick touched on, I mean, our production times are long to begin with, right? So everything, everything we do tends to be longer just because of our production process. And the challenge has always been, how do we do a better job at getting that product through, right? And scheduling it so it's more efficient. And that's a big challenge. I mean, that continues to be a challenge for us. I mean, you always look at your business and you try to improve, and those are things that we talk internally in terms of tracking systems and efficiencies all the time. And it's one of those things that, like Nick said, at this point, it's a labor issue, but it's not an excuse, because we have to really figure out, okay, we have this labor issue, and at the end of the day, instead of saying it's going to be 8 weeks, it's really probably up to us to say, you know what, it's going to be 12 weeks because we're probably short, in that production line at this time. And that accurate information is something that we need to do probably a better job at. I mean, it's the fact of life.
There's this archaic feeling in our building that, like, well, if I tell someone that, then they're going to be mad, so I have to tell them a different number.
Interesting.
Where it's like, people just want, really just want the truth so that they can, but again, that's sort of like a behind the scenes thing that no one really should care about or know about, because that's totally our problem. But
and we do, but we do care. I mean, dude, like, you're one of my biggest suppliers. Like, it matters. Like, I'm John, you and I are friends. Nick, maybe someday we'll get there, but it's like, we should, well, I've only met you like twice. So like, we like,
I think I would say that we're friendly.
Okay, we're friendly. We're definitely friendly and cordial. But like, our businesses depend on one another, and
Absolutely.
you
It,
should have a better, more open like dialogue, I think, about this stuff for sure. And I'm not saying like this is a Nick's thing. I think it's sort of somewhat systematic within the broader, maybe higher end level, you know what I mean, where you see this stuff happen. And I'm not saying it's definitely not limited just to Horween. I mean, it happens with everybody.
Yeah. Well, it's a high end problem because if you take a long time to deliver something that's crappy, like you just go away. I mean, there's no. I mean, the only thing that our saving grace on it taking us a while to make stuff right now is that I still think we make really nice stuff. And
You do.
But if it wasn't nice, then what are you waiting for?
so it's a big problem. I mean, it's not a problem, like I said, specific to us.
It's a big opportunity.
It's a problem in the sense that it has to be addressed, right? And we spend a lot of time right now in the tannery talking about this. Again, there's weekly meetings about, okay, we're going to put in this tracking system, and who's going to be responsible for the tracking system? But what level are we going to scan product? So it's a really complex issue. But
Well, I feel like I should add that like we have the same problems. You know what I mean? Like we have the same issues, and I'm very sympathetic to what you're dealing with.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I'll turn around. So that's one hat, and the second hat on the sales side, it's an opportunity, right? Because we've probably let customers, other tanneries or competitors, nip away at what we do because of the fact that we haven't been able to deliver, and that leaves us vulnerable. And the thing that we have to then hang our hat on is we make really good leather. And if we didn't make really good leather, we'd lose a lot of customers. So, I mean, it's a really double-edged sword, right? Because it's something that you want to deliver to your customers, a product that is industry leading, but you also want to deliver that product on time. Because if we deliver product on time, you're going to deliver shoes on time, and you're going to sell more shoes, and then our business is going to be repeatable. And so it's a really simple thing to say, but it's a really complex problem. And
I'm not asking for your. I know it's important to you.
No,
guys.
but again, we're just talking here. But again, it's one of those things that it's frustrating. It's a frustrating. It's 4 years of frustration in terms of deliveries, and
it's been 4 years. It's crazy. It has for us too. I mean, it's.
I get an attendance report every day of like who's on vacation and who didn't show up and everything, and it's crazy.
it's
Like
crazy.
if it's under like if the number of people that aren't out of the building for various reasons is under 15 people, like I'm like, okay, we're gonna be all right today. We can probably get. I mean, it's just. I mean, how do you like? We had one Monday where 20 for various causes, 26 people didn't come. It's like, how do you? And we're not big. I mean, it's not like we have 2,000 employees. We've got 130 people. 100. So it's like, how do you plan for that? I mean, it's like
I think
your whole day is different.
It's a slippery slope to get into that conversation, even. But yeah, we feel the same.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not making an excuse. It's just.
No. I don't mean that. I mean, it's like, how do you solve it? Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know the answer to that, but yeah, there are. Yeah, that is a tough part.
Yeah, and we don't have it's not a conversation that we have. I feel like we used to have it. We were having it more when we had maybe more capacity. But it's like, so what? Like, so like at the end of the year, it's like, who are we not selling to that we should be having a conversation with? And it's like, well, how about like anyone that wants leather in like 2 weeks or less, which is like 90% of the world. I mean, any fashion stuff, like we miss out on a lot of the women's business just because the cycle time is so much faster, and we just can't we just can't. We're
I
not.
mean, have you thought about making bets on that?
With who?
Well, no, not necessarily women's or whatever, but just having in stock stuff ready to go, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more nuanced than that because also the stuff that we make
Is
tends
it
to
though?
not.
I mean, is it?
Yeah, I mean, like because it's like heavy, oily. I mean, it's just it ends
I'm
up.
not talking about women specific. I'm
Yeah.
just saying like a product you believe in, have it in stock. Let's go.
Yes, we've had conversations about it, and we used to do it more on the core products of stuff, but now, I mean, these days it's hard to even keep those because we would finish things to crust, like specifically with Chrome XL. We would finish and we get a report every week where it's like what we have above orders and below orders in terms of Chrome XL crust in stock. And it used to be, the numbers used to be in the positive. We would always have more there so that when someone would order it, it would be like, okay, so all we have to do now is we have to finish it and sort it. So like we've got a chance at doing it in a somewhat timely way, and like it's natural back anyway, so we can sort of all finish it. We can finish it all kind of the same to a point with a few different weights, and we know we sell mostly 5.5 or 5.5, 6, so we can keep it there. But even now, that is not. I mean, we're kind of like hand to mouth on that too.
It's a good problem, man.
Well, it's a good problem if you have a solution for it.
And, I think
you just charge more, it's what you guys, right?
The world is very sensitive though. I mean, it's just, I mean, we already are on the high end of everything. So, I mean, how sensitive, I mean, that's probably the other 2 hours of John's day is like, how can we take, a nickel off this per foot price?
Yeah.
That's like, no, I know.
That's Timberland or something. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's any of the big companies that are buying a lot of stuff. It's just,
no,
and it's not just with us, but yeah.
If you buy 1 million of something, if you can get 5 cents off, that matters.
Yeah. It's tricky. It's a tricky business.
Especially
footwear, the leather and footwear business specifically. People have. It's a lot more complicated.
Do people know you're really in the sporting goods business? Do people really? They know that?
Yeah, a lot of people.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, you just said footwear, and I'm like, well, really? They make the best basketballs and footballs in the world.
We do. It's a very different product with a very different approach, though, and compared to everything else, relatively, straightforward in as much as that we don't make 7,000 colors. We make like a dozen colors.
Is there something to that?
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. One of the notes I wrote on this for this with John was, do we make too much stuff? Was my note.
Well, your friend. Like, I'm pretty sure I know who that is, but yeah.
I think you're pretty sure you know too.
So I think that's an interesting question though, because I think again, I'll show my age. When I started, it was Chrome XL, it was chamois, a Latigo, and then football, and then Cordovan. So we really had 5 product lines. And so in like 1999, 2000, when the industry decided to leave the US, we really had to pivot. I mean, we were starting to add some products, but we became more boutique, right? We were always a high-end tanner, but the people that were left started coming to us wanting to do different products, different colors, different looks. And so we started developing those products, and we did shift. I mean, we became more attentive to product development with brands, and we became more open to running colors. And so that became our niche. We started doing different products and different colors and different looks. And we picked up some new companies that we were working with. And so it's one of those things that we have an exhaustive line, but it was really a necessity because of the industry changing. And that's, kind of goes hand in hand, but there is a lot of stuff. I mean, we do a lot of different things. So sometimes you walk through the tannery and you're like, oh my God, there's so many different colors up here and different products. And it's confusing sometimes, but it's because of who we are.
It makes you special too.
Yeah, correct.
For sure.
I remember having conversations with when things started to shift, or I guess maybe they'd already shifted, but maybe just the people that were complaining about them were different internally. But like, oh, we've got so many different things and so much stuff to keep track of. And the conversation was like, this is the business now, so just like figure it out. Like, just we're this is what we're doing now. Yeah. Like this is the business that like is available to us, or part of the business that's available to us. So let's just figure out how to do it, because that's the way the world is now. And that's where Tannery Row came from, because we were pre-Tannery Row. Like, we were trying as a tannery to do as much of that business as possible, and it was like it was a disaster. It was a disaster. Everything was wrong, and it took 2 years, and it was expensive, and just like all the things that you can't put together. So then Tannery Row came, and they aggregate. They take those. They buy mills, and then they break them out into sort of retail quantities, and that's when you aggregate all that business together. It's good. It's a real deal. Yeah, it's important.
Well, kudos to you, John, for leading that, and Nick, you and Skip for kind of having that foresight to make that possible. I don't know. You guys are pretty wild, like what you guys do. It's incredible. No, I mean all the different stuff.
Wild in what way?
In good ways. With all the different options, and with all the innovation, and with all the history and the heritage and the longevity on like, oh well, I knew that like in 1918 British riding shoe had this type of toe cap, so we're going to use that as inspiration for this next line of things. I know you didn't do that, but that is a conceivable thing you guys can come up with, which is pretty incredible.
We do think about like that sometimes, especially my dad.
Every day. Yeah, is that your dad?
My dad's like he's just like mad scientist. Yeah. Just like I don't know what you're doing, but you're happy about it, and it ends up being cool stuff, but sometimes it's like that is the least commercially viable thing I've ever seen. Like he did some finishing some Cordovan in some like really like using sponges, and like actually use like the shavings. So he'd like get the shavings wet, and like he was using the shavings from the Cordovan to apply the dye, and it gave it like this really cool like kind of like stucco, like fresco appearance. And it was awesome, but it's like, I don't know how you can't even do it a second time. So, but that's why we love him, because, he comes up with stuff like that. And there's plenty of stuff that he does come up with. I'm not trashing him, because I hope if he listens to this, hopefully he won't get this far into it, but,
it's pretty far,
but he does, he's definitely kept us on the straight and narrow for a bunch of years.
But he loves that. Like he loves that's his passion. Like looking at someone will send something in from like 1940 and say, how do we do this? And you won't see him for 3 days because he's in the plant trying all these different things. And that like, and when he finally gets it, it's like this aha moment, and it's like, look at this. And it's kind of cool. That passion's amazing. Yeah.
He loves it. It's good. Shuyler, I know you told me, but will you tell me again how you got into the boot business?
My dad bought it in 2013. He was a logger who made some money, and like, do you ever see Rising Sun? I'm going to digress here.
The movie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So he was kind of like that, like buying things from Japanese, like semiconductor companies, and like NEC and displays, and but he was like dealing with Japan in the 80s when it was super cool, and he was like the first guy I knew to get a cell phone. Anyway, I digress. So that did okay, and then but he worked his way through high school and college as a logger. My grandfather was a logger. My great grandfather had a logging company. So he was always into this kind of side of the boots, and so bought the boot business in 2013. And then he's okay. He had a tumor, a brain tumor, but it took a lot out of him. So I kind of moved over to Spokane in 2020 to kind of take it over. But I'd been involved pretty decently since 2013, like on the website stuff and e-commerce. That's kind of my background. Yeah.
What were you doing before?
I was an executive at a outdoor products company. Worked my way up there, but like patio furniture covers, umbrellas, hammocks, textile-based products that would go in your backyard, called Classic Accessories. I worked in consulting for a year after a private equity transaction gone not so good / other acquisition. Anyway, and then that didn't go so good. So I ended up working for a business intelligence company for about a year, and then moved over to Spokane. I know I've talked about this. I'm sorry. I feel like I should have a better story about it.
No, that's a fine story.
1 second.
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's I think that it's crazy that, I mean, obviously I have a family connection, but there seems to be family connections everywhere in this industry.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's a weird business, and it's a weird industry in general because it's well, I guess I was, like I'm reflecting on it as a little bit of an outsider because like it's incredibly competitive and at the same time it's not in some ways. And so like you do have some time. I think this has changed a little bit recently, but like you had time to kind of introduce people to it and have them come up and learn different aspects of it. And maybe that's true in everything, but like I used to work in the startup world, and like that was just like such a foreign thing, like you just didn't have the time to have your kid work with you or kind of get familiar with it. Here it's like, I don't know, like when did Chrome Excel come out?
1907.
1907, and it's still humming along, and you guys have pivoted through like a million freaking things, and market forces have changed everything, and you're still here. I don't know. I don't think Nick's. I think footwear is definitely a little more dynamic, just because definitely a little less capital investment versus a tannery, but you do get to have your family around you, and if you want, and have them involved in the decision. It's, I don't know, it's been an interesting experience. Like I never would have thought I would have had a job kind of with my dad that would have brought us together a little bit. Like that's kind of weird to me, growing up, and now it's like it happened, and it's been a really cool experience.
I think it's an interesting industry because it's on the leather side, you have a lot of small companies. If you go to Linnipel, for example, you walk into the show and it's a huge, it looks like a huge industry, and it's a good sized industry, but it's a pretty segregated industry, right? So everyone has their little pieces of pie, and it's really, everyone's kind of protective of those little markets. And it's not the most open of companies, right? So there's not a lot of collaboration between companies because everyone's really protective. And it's good and bad, right? It's bad on the marketing side. For example, I think the industry right now is going through some tough times in terms of combating alternatives to leather and having a united message and really putting forth what we stand for. And if we were a really cohesive group, I think we could do a better marketing job and say this is what leather stands for. But because it's so fragmented, it's not a unified message, right? And so that hurts us. So it's really interesting to see kind of these segments not be divided, but as a whole, it's a decent sized industry. And I think the footwear industry is kind of similar, right? Because you have the white shoe industry, and you have the brown shoe industry, and it's not real collaborative. Everyone tries to, it's pretty competitive. And I think right now it's because there's not a lot of direction in the industry. I think it's a little bit more competitive than it has been in the last few years.
I think it's super competitive. Yeah, that's interesting.
Especially on the commoditized end of everything. I think that those mega factories that just, white, brown, and black, .8 to 1.2 millimeter, like the, leather for sneakers and stuff, or even better than that. I can't, that industry seems cutthroat. Like, I don't know. That world is so far away from me. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
It's an interesting vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say though, I think, I obviously had the opportunity working with my father, and, when Skip came and asked me to work for the company, I would never thought that I would want to work with my dad. Nick knows my dad, so, but at the end of the day, I can look back and say it was like you said, Shuyler, it was pretty cool. You know what? It was a cool experience. And so, when I started, was I thinking that was going to be a cool experience? Absolutely not. That was my biggest fear. And so, so to have that opportunity, I'm pretty blessed that I had that opportunity.
Hey, John, how long have you been?
Long time. Go ahead.
Well, no, how long?
With the company?
Yeah.
I don't know anymore. Like 32 years, maybe 33 years.
It's a long time.
A long time. Doesn't seem like that long. It really doesn't. So.
It's weird working with your dad, because it's like, especially when it's a similar venture that you're both invested in, like, it's hard to find other things in life that provide you with that same focus and like direction and alignment, I guess. You know what I mean?
Commonality.
When it's just like your childhood, you can have very differing opinions on like the best result of that, right? But like when it comes to the business, like it's a nice set of guardrails in some ways, I think, for like my dad and I have not always gotten along, but like, this provided like a good common reference. Like, okay, like we speak the same language, and we have broadly the same goals, and I think that was actually really good for our relationship, to be honest.
That's interesting for John, because John and his dad were in different segments of the business. So like with me and my dad, like we're sort of in the same. Yeah, at least I think we're sort of in the same sector. But like John's in sales, sales, and his dad was our CFO. So it's like, was your dad was yelling at you about bad accounts? People that were like delinquent, and, yeah, wasn't he?
Oh,
you got to call this guy. They go, they're past their over 30 days or whatever.
This could be another episode for another time. Because,
I don't want to turn into a therapy session.
Right? All I know is I was fired a lot of times.
Yeah, that's funny.
And I was fired a lot of times, and the next day the phone would ring and ask where I was, and I was told politely to get my ass back to work.
Yeah, you grew up. There were some characters. I mean, there still are a lot of characters, but I think that, not that the good old days were like the good old days, but just the people that were involved were pretty wild.
Yeah, and I think they would have had a hard time in today's. Not a hard time, but the business has changed so much. It would have been interesting to see how they managed the business under these circumstances rather than what it was 40, 50 years ago.
Oh yeah, no, they wouldn't have.
Yeah,
it wouldn't have.
they were not.
It wouldn't have happened.
The group that we're talking about they were not real flexible. They were really all linear people.
That's the like understatement of the century. Yeah.
Right?
Not real flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather was the top of that list for sure. Or at least he shared the
yes,
the mentality. Yeah. There was not a lot of flexibility for sure.
Yeah. Like I said, another topic for another day.
Yeah. Well, I've been talking to Phil. Actually, I probably should have said Phil's not here this week. As we're wrapping up, Phil's still playing music, so I think he'll be back next week. And next week meaning probably like 3 weeks from now in terms of when an episode would come out. But
I think it was kind of funny because I was on the phone with Shuyler, and you're like, ask him if he wants to join, and he's like, I don't know. He's like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun.
It was great.
I mean,
Yeah.